Thank you very much. And yes, just to add to that welcome, very warm welcome to the ICA. I'm sure this afternoon is going to be an exciting and very interesting discussion. I'm sure we've got lots of experts here beyond the panel who I'll introduce later. I'm particularly excited to be here at the ICA because one of my great heroes, who I think we can count as the sort of grandfather of modern design criticism, Rainer Bannon used to meet with his friends here at the ICA in the late 1950s. And they used to meet to discuss issues of contemporary society and design and art, which is very much what the Design Culture Salon is about as well. The Design Culture Salon itself has been in existence for 4 years now. We have been meeting at the V&A just about once a month through the academic part of the year. We feel it's about time we sort of got out and about. We've already been out and about once already this year because we ran the first V&A Design Culture Salon in Shenzhen in China just about a month ago. And that was part of a wider research project that myself and some of my colleagues here have been engaged in. And I was going to ask Kat Rossi to tell us a bit more about that project.
Now?
Kat, yeah, do. Yeah. Right now.
Hi, I'm Kat Rossi. I'm a design historian at Kingston University, which is partly where we have this link. And together with Justin and also with Guy's involvement, we're leading a project, an AHRC project called China's Creative Communities, Making Value and the Values of Making. This is quite a short project, it's about 3 months, and it builds on another project that was instigated by the British Council with the AHRC with Becky here in October, where a group of 9 academics and practitioners and entrepreneurs went to Shenzhen and Shanghai for 2 weeks to try and understand the making movement. And building on from that with this project, we're particularly keen to not only to understand the kind of particular making movement in China, which is heavily supported by the government in the sense of a very specific focus on the economic potential of makerspaces. But what we're really interested in is how you could support that by looking at those makerspaces and other kind of cultures of making. It could be design, it could be craft, it could be manufacturing, but also to think about other kinds of values beyond the economic. So to talk about the community value of making, the sustainable potential of makerspaces and making, creativity, entrepreneurialism, and all other kinds of values that we've been encountering. So we organised a trip to Shenzhen a few weeks ago where we ran a series of workshops, and we also in makerspaces including Liao, and we also invited 2 key people from the making movement in China who will be hearing more of, David Lee and Liao, to join us for a series of workshops and events this week. So we've been all over the place, from Bristol to Manchester to Amsterdam to Makerversity to here. This is our final event, so I'm really pleased that you can join us.
Thank you very much, Kat. And these photos, which are kind of reeling before you, were done by Nat Hunter, who runs the machine rooms in East London, and she was part of our group who went to Shenzhen a month ago. So thanks to Nat. Nat unfortunately woke up this morning with a Shenzhen sneeze and wasn't able to get here to represent in person her photos. But Kat mentioned an earlier project that she's involved in, which was supported and driven by the British Council. So I'd ask Becky Shoesmith to say a bit about that and other things.
And thanks, Guy. I just basically wanted to say a quick hello and give a bit of background to, I guess, how this all started, really. So last year we started looking into makers in China with organisations like Nesta and the Arts and Humanities Research Council, and that was to really find out, I guess, kind of what making is like in China and what it means to be a maker there. Because we've got a longer term ambition to build a programme that is linking makers in the UK and China, that is doing it in a really impactful way, in an intelligent way. And one of the things that came out of that is a report that's just recently been published by Nesta, which is looking at mapping makerspaces across China, and there's some copies at the back, if, feel free to take one. And Tom's going to speak a bit more about that. It was incredibly insightful, but really challenging at times. And the other project was the project that Kat and Justin and Martin here took part in, which was more experimental and essentially saying, go to Shenzhen, Shanghai, meet as many people as possible, and then come back and share your insights. And out of the back of that project, Kat and Justin got the grant from AHRC to develop the project that you are seeing today. So we've got an incredible panel. David's been quite instrumental in helping us shape all the programs that we've been doing in China. And yeah, I hope you really enjoy it. I'm excited to hear what you have to say.
Thank you very much, Becky. On to the core business of this afternoon, the salon, which is directed at the question of what are the values of design and making in China. And going back to Rainer Banham, he gathered with artists such as Eduardo Paolozzi and Richard Hamilton, and they were kind of the people who shaped British pop art back then. And obviously their positioning, their thinking was about the influence of America in Britain at that time, the late 50s. And obviously today our kind of what we're, I suppose, trying to work through or think through is about how we're positioned in relation to China, and trying to work that out. So I really hope this afternoon helps us do this. We're in a kind of different cycle, I think, now. There's lots of very broad statistics one could kick off with when thinking about China, but perhaps one of the most stunning for those of us who are in the design field is that currently China is producing 300,000 design graduates a year, and which sort of tops. I was stunned to find that Brazil produces 45,000 design graduates a year, but that really tops it an awful lot further. And when we put that in the broader context of the growth of higher education and the knowledge economy in China, the fact that between 2000 and 2010, the number of higher education institutions in China has risen from 1,022 to now 2,262. You get a sense of the speed and the intensity of change which is going on in China. Indeed, when we were in Shenzhen, we were sort of joking that there was little point in being there for more than a week, because all our data we collected on Monday would be out of date by Friday. Anyway, I'm going to turn to our panel and ask each of them a kind of scene-setting question. And I firstly want to start with Zara Arshad. Now, Zara is the founder and editor of the Design China blog, and she's a bit of a globetrotter. She's been a former resident of Indonesia, Syria and China, and she worked on the Ikagrada Beijing event. She worked with the British Council in China and for the Beijing Design Week. So she's got a superb kind of overview of Chinese design. So I really just wanted to kick off by asking Zara a really perhaps potentially bland question, but what do you see are the current design strengths, or where are the current strengths in China?
Okay, so maybe if we could take into consideration the more canonical forms of design. Of course, different disciplines have their own strengths. Fashion, for example, is becoming more visible in public consciousness, both within mainland China and elsewhere. For example, I'm sure you're all aware Guo Pei just yesterday was named as one of Time's 100 most influential people. But what's been particularly striking to me as I've been documenting design in China, as I've been using my blog as a tool to interview individual designers, is that the stories that are uncovered at that designer level particularly in furniture design, for instance. So Xiaotian Yu is an example. He's an independent Beijing-based furniture designer. And in my early conversations with him, I think back in 2012, we had conversations around manufacturing and how he got around manufacturing his own furniture designs. And he suggested that big factories across the country were not necessarily, at least at that time, supportive of independent designers, and they only agreed to making prototypes. And sometimes those prototypes were of very low quality. And so I think more recently now we've seen furniture designers working more closely with craftsmen on the one hand, but also in small-scale workshops. So Jing Jing, who operates under the name Nai Han Li, who Brendan spoke with in Italy not too long ago, she has her own small-scale factory where she's able to prototype her furniture designs, are mostly made of wood. But then there have been instances where she's opened up her own personal workshop to other designers that have been operating in the city. For instance, I think it was in 2013 or 2014, there was a Dutch designer, a Beijing-based Dutch designer called Henny van Nistelrooy, who was creating a range of customized stools, and he wasn't able to source a manufacturer that would create those stools. So she opened up that workshop to him. And so you kind of see these instances where these small-scale workshops are spaces in which craftsmen come together with these designers, and you engage in those conversations around manufacture. Another example is Gucci, who is another Beijing-based independent furniture designer. He was originally based in Shanghai, but moved to Beijing because he suggested that the resources and work access to factories, small-scale factories, were actually much more accessible there. And at the time that I spoke with him, I think it was also in 2012, he'd been working for 3 years with one particular small-scale factory, engaging in conversations directly with craftsmen around creating his contemporary design and furniture works. And I think just to provide one other very small example, based in south of China, maybe not too far from Shanghai, in a place called Hangzhou, is Pinwu, who are a group of 3 designers. One is from Serbia, one is from China, and one is from Germany. And they're really drawing on the knowledge of local craftsmen, but also on locally available materials to inform their contemporary design processes. They use the term rong, which means like fusing rather than deconstructing. So this is their philosophy, and they're really drawing on these local resources, both in terms of the materials and the people resources, the craftsmen, in their work. And I think this is the most exciting part of design in China in its more canonical sense, is these initiatives, these people instances, these interactions, and it's potentially one of the strengths that I see in my conversations. I'd also like to touch on, if I may, very, very briefly, government investment in design and manufacturing, which I think you alluded to, which is, it contributes to the conversation in a wider sense. And maybe this is something we can come back to, but as we all know, design and manufacturing is something that the state government in China have been focusing on, especially since 2008, following the global financial crisis, or so-called global financial crisis. And so we had a lot of the from made in China to created in China strategy, economic strategy, being bandied about by various politicians and key policymakers. And part of that, and of course all of these narratives are part of localized forms of the cultural and creative industries, which saw top-down investment from the state in mainly infrastructure, so creative parks, setting up a variety of different industrial parks. But there's always that, always these observations that yes, the infrastructure is there, but where is the content? And that's always been an issue. So I think it will be interesting to hear more about how this might manifest in more recent politics under Xi Jinping's Made in 2025 initiative, which is of course shifting the focus on manufacturing more explicitly. But I suppose what I really wanted to draw attention to was, yes, there are these top-down narratives that we pay attention to, but also to invert that in a sense. So moving back to Pinwu, they've last year, they created, alongside government investment, a design library, which I think was covered in the latest edition of Icon magazine. And they weren't able to do this until they were able to pair up with the local government and acquire the necessary funding to set this up. And this design library is a huge building. It comprises a shop, a tea room, spaces for resident designers, so they will invite designers from all over the world to come in, stay in this space for about 3 months, working with local craftsmen, local materials. And so this is really an instance, I think, where we have to take into consider a designer agency in these processes. So yes, you have these top-down narratives, but also to invert it and think of the other way as well.
Thank you very much, Zara. It's really interesting. That sense of the relationship between sort of individual agency and large-scale infrastructure is very interesting. And I think moving on to talking briefly about maker spaces, which I think somehow fit in between those two in a way, I want to invite Tom Saunders to say a few words. Tom Saunders is senior researcher at Nesta, which is a charity that promotes innovative solutions to social challenges. He's been involved in various research projects and been particularly working on helping governments learn from learn from innovations around the world. And his very recent publication, which we've heard about, this publication, Made in China, Makerspaces and the Search for Mass Innovation, I think is a really useful, provides a very useful sort of focus at this kind of moment, because it seems to be moving so quickly. So I wanted to just turn to your experience, Tom, and really ask you a bit, I suppose, to sketch out your view of makerspaces in China, and also how do they differ, how do they function differently in China than your experience of the same elsewhere?
Thanks, Guy. So I guess I'm here because we wrote this report. It's a kind of survey of 100 makerspaces in China, and we did a couple of trips out there. So we have a bit of knowledge, but David is really kind of the global expert here, so feel free to contradict everything I say in a minute. But yeah, I guess so it's quite interesting, makerspaces, because it's a Western import. It's a foreign concept to China. Why does China need makerspaces? Because in China, making is really a kind of national specialism. We specialize in banking and services. China makes, still now most of the stuff we use. So why did we need this foreign concept, a space to make things, when that's what the economy is for? So China makerspaces, it's not about nostalgia for working with your hands, because cities are still sites of production. Things are still made in cities in China. And it's still, even though Chinese cities are getting more expensive, it's still not about the need for space to produce stuff, because in cities you can kind of, go down a little alleyway and find factories and warehouses and things like that, whereas, in Western cities you need maker spaces because there's just no space to make things. And also, it's not about bringing manufacturing back into cities, because it's still there. So if that's what it's not about, then what is it about? So makerspaces are really tied to a kind of vision of where the economy is going in China and what needs to happen on a much larger scale. So one thing is about entrepreneurship. So particularly for the government and business, makerspaces are about supporting kind of hardware entrepreneurship. So you have now makerspaces popping up within companies in China. The government is funding a lot of what it calls makerspaces. if you went to these places, you'd probably not recognize them as a makerspace if you know what one looks like here, because they often don't have tools. It's more like a kind of co-working space which focuses on hardware. Then the other side is the kind of makerspaces are about a revolution in the education system. So traditionally, education in China, it's very good at producing graduates with kind of all the core skills around science and maths and technology, and what you get is really good engineers. But what's missing is what you often hear when you talk to Western companies in China is that kind of creative spark, that kind of desire to push to the next level, to be innovative. And so a lot of companies in China are opening makerspaces as a way to kind of help their employees just be creative, just play with technology, come up with ideas. So one example of that is Nanjing Ruichuan Makerspace, which is actually a company that produces kind of military technology. So we thought, we're going to see DIY rocket launchers and killer robots and that kind of stuff, but no, not at all. They were making things like keyboards where the keys light up so that it can help you learn how to play. And you think, why are these kind of Tsinghua, best university in China, engineers making these random little toys? And it's because the founders of this makerspace think that they've come through China's best university, but actually their minds are quite closed off and they really need to be able to kind of play and have fun. And they hope that that will help them come up with better ideas for satellites or whatever it is they're making. And then the third kind of driver of this is really the kind of rising middle class in China. So, there's a book by Duncan Hewitt called Getting Rich First, and really that's kind of what it's been about in China for the longest time. People have not really had the kind of capacity and ability to play and have fun because they've, there's basically no welfare system, and so you need to pay the mortgage before you kind of do this fun stuff. But now you have middle class with secure jobs and holidays. It's a growing concept in China, free time off, and so people have got these evenings and weekends free, and it's like, well, what do we do with it? And makerspaces are one of the things that some people are doing. So, for example, Shenzhen DIY, it's a makerspace in Shenzhen, and if you're familiar with like London Hackerspace, it's kind of like that. It's very kind of industrial, shabby makerspace, lots of half-finished projects around the place. And they're not really for anything, these projects. They're electronic drum kits and they're little robots and they're kind of go-karts. Every makerspace in China seems to make an electronic go-kart. I'm not sure why, but it's just for the kind of fun of it. And so when you talk about kind of the difference, it's quite difficult because it's such a diverse field. And I guess perhaps the word makerspace is not that useful, but in a Chinese context. But there's a huge amount going on, and there's, especially from our interest at Nesta and kind of people we work with in government, it's looking at what can we learn. And I think, I think it's a space we still need to watch because, it's quite a new field as well in China. I think David founded the first makerspace in 2010. So it's still a pretty new field, but we think that with all this energy and activity happening in government and businesses and universities around making and makerspaces, it will definitely be something we can learn a lot from in the future.
Thank you very much, Tom. One thing I didn't check out, are you all familiar with what makerspaces are? Anybody need a dictionary definition or anything like that? No, okay. Well, on my visit to Shenzhen, I got a sense of the whole city of Shenzhen as a city of between 11 and 23 million, depending which day of the week it is, as one massive makerspace in itself, or as Justin here described it, as one big man shed, because it's a place awash with components, awash with tooling, full of really bright, interested and very motivated people. But of course, we can also think of makerspaces within makerspaces, and one of those makerspaces is a very important one in Shenzhen is Liao, which Liao here runs. And I think Lit's experience sort of setting up Litchi Lab, we spoke about it this morning, but coming out of a very particular sort of moment, I suppose, in creative education. I just wanted to really follow up on what Tom was said about this notion of Chinese education of being quite traditional, perhaps quite rigid, with not so much space for creative development. But I wondered if you saw, the same. Are there actually changes? Are there spaces for creative development in Chinese education? And if so, what are they? And how does something like Litchi Lab sit within that?
So the Chinese education system is very traditional, and kids has a lot of textbook to learn and need to remember that to get high scores, because that link to if you can enter a good school, like good high school or good university, and people think this will directly influence the future, influence your income after you graduate from the university. So it's very heavy. So it's like in a typical high school in Shenzhen, kids can get up at 6:30 in the morning and start their study until 11:30 in the night, and then go to bed. So every day, day in, day out, day in, day out. Yeah, 5 to 6 days a week. So that's what happened for the public school. And last year, actually, the Chinese government put a lot of attention to the education. It's like in Shenzhen, there are 100 public school pointed to build your makerspace in your school. And these 100 schools, each of them at least will get 15,000 pounds every year to build all the things, like pay for the equipment, pay for the furniture in the makerspace, or the other thing, or hire a school from outside of the hire a teacher outside of the school to give the class, something like that. So that's the minimum number the school will get. So actually a lot of them face some difficulty. So it's like the concept of makerspace is new. It's new to the Chinese school. This concept is new, but the value is not new. I think the value is not new. So one thing the parents and teachers always talk is they will say our kid lack of the ability to actually make something. That is also true in China. So though the manufacturing resources are very rich in China, but actually our young generation, like my age or younger than me, still away from manufacturing. Not in the same way. Maybe just 1 mile away, but not in the same way, because all focus is here, so not in the same way. Then parents will say, hey, you cannot fix the light, you cannot fix the door of your closet, something like that. But then how can you survive in your future life, like live by yourself or other things? So they talk that a lot actually. I think that's one of the value of maker education. Though maker education is a new word, but I don't think the value is new. So the teacher in the public school, when they get this task, this assignment or this kind of thing from the government, they don't know what to do. They can only look for the things that are visible to them, like 3D printers, like laser cutter, very visible, and like then and can we represent the maker movement, represent the maker movement all over the world, and they decided to put the money to buy this kind of equipment. But what happened afterward is they don't know what to do with equipment, and the equipment supplier that sell them this equipment don't know how to build a curriculum. So some school may have a lot of expensive equipment, just put there be beautiful things on the decks and collecting task. So what they lack, I think, is they want some people, they want a community that can help them build an idea about what maker curriculum can be, how you can enter, how you can connect with other nodes, how you can get resource, get supported from other nodes. And I think that's what Literalam want to do. So now Literalam are collaborating with a lot different types of schools in Shenzhen, like from primary school to secondary school to high school, so different type of school. And sometimes we send teachers to the school to teach maker education class, and sometimes we have teacher inviting to Literalam and we train their teacher, and sometimes we help them buy curriculum, buy equipment, buy other things to design their space. And I think that's what we can do now, but I think in the future, if they know more about what maker education is, know more about how to connect to other people, other resources, like the resource in UK or the resource of other city by themselves, then Literalam don't need to do that. Then Literalam can shift to another role that can support them in another level. So yeah, that's what I think Literalam can do and how Literalam can fix it. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lit. So, in a sense, you're hoping you will be without a job eventually.
No. I don't.
You have another plan.
Yeah, I think you don't. All things changing.
Yeah.
So I don't do this, but I can do other things to support this.
Yeah. And it's quite interesting, isn't it, that the actual building of a curriculum is a creative process in itself, of course, and sort of working at that kind of level. And it's interesting to think about the different forms of creative education that exist in different countries, but it seems to be very embedded into this idea of making. And I wonder if that then creates a different kind of designer or a different kind of creative practitioner than, say, someone whose creative education is built through drama or through drawing or something like that. Which leads me on to David Lee here, who has got incredibly extensive experience of working in making and design. He told me the other day that he gave up a PhD in California in the early 1990s because the internet came along and that was far more interesting. I know the feeling. His career has been incredibly illustrious. He set up the first hackerspace in China in 2010. He co-founded Hacked Matter, a think tank on makers and open innovation, and Maker Collide in 2015. And he really seems to be the sort of go-to person on maker and hacker culture in China. There is now quite a large literature, I think, on maker spaces and the creative economy in China. And everywhere I go in this literature, David seems to be cited. So here we have in person, which is fantastic. I wanted to ask you, from your experience then, your experience of the USA and Europe and in China. Is China producing a different kind of designer than perhaps we're used to in Europe?
I think when we started to look at the maker movement, a few things very strongly characterize maker movement. Is first, this open source power. No longer things are proprietary. No longer things are kept from each other. This technology common. where everybody use, everybody develop on top of. And that's one of the big characteristic of the maker movement. On the second one is this cooperative community. It characterizes the sharing of how to do things, sharing how to make projects, sharing how to, even on the internet. And the third, characterized by this very rapid sharing of the design through the digital fabrication. This morning we are at a workshop. Everybody's drawing happy, and I actually didn't do it because one of the secret, I cannot draw to save my life. So that's the reason I wasn't. But been enabled by the digital fabrication. No longer I have to be able to do this myself. Someone out there will have this 3D model. Someone out there will have this laser cut ready. I can take it, tweak it. Well, cannot draw, but I can tweak. So then I can build a new thing around this out of open source, out of this commonly shared design, and also the way of the community. So that's been the core of how maker movement has been pushed forward into this different kind of application. I mean, the military contractor pick it up because they want their designer to be more open. They want the engineer to access more information. Education pick it up. But at the core of it is this. And there's a lot of extrapolation on this if you look at Chris Anderson's Makers. It's talking about this becoming the long tail of how the future of new kind of hardware is going to emerge. But doing this since 2010, starting the first makerspace in China, I've been invited to talk, to give a talk about the maker movement, to give a talk about what maker is about. And it's very interesting, wherever I go, Beijing, Shanghai, all this space, and you face designer, you face engineers. As soon as you drop the word open source hardware, everybody's question come up. How do you make money if you give it away? How do you do this? How can that happen? Is it possible? But on my tour, surprisingly, arriving in Shenzhen, and I was on stage talking about maker movement, talking about this sharing of design, community, open source hardware. And after that, I was really expecting the question pop up again because I'm so used to it. And instead of asking the question on that, how that make money, how that can work, I got a reaction in Shenzhen is what's new about this? We've been doing this for 2 decades. This is how our industry works. That created a fascination about Shenzhen. Why we set up the Hack Matters to study the maker movement in China. So a lot of makerspace, and especially the popularity today, is not just makerspace as a leisure activity or makerspace as education. And a big chunk of it, and every makerspace we go to, everybody asks one question: how do you sustain this? At the end of the day, how does maker make money? What kind of future are there? So we roll back and we look at why Shenzhen give me the answer, why they told me they've been around for 2 decades doing this, how big the industry they created. So we look at very particular segment of the Shenzhen's industry. It's called the Sanzaifeng industry. So they are the people who makes all the wacky phone shaped like a Lamborghini car, phone double as a flashlight, chargers, and the speakers. Phone coming in all crazy shape and form with 7 speakers as loud as a boombox. So we look at that as the first. None of this is a conceptual prototype of design students' graduate work. Every single one of them is shipping product. Every single one of them fulfill a need of a particular group. A 7-speaker phone goes to construction worker, who in the construction side, they need entertainment, but they cannot wear the earset. That happened. Also, the different interesting long tail kind of mobile phone come out of this industry. And they built it up to about 300 million units a year. It's a quarter of the global mobile shipment. Itself is $100 billion industry. And that industry works on exactly the same principle as maker movement. If you go online and Google on this one, is the principle of Sanzai. Take as much as possible from the ecosystem. Don't do anything. If I don't have to go design a board, I won't go that. If I don't have to redesign a case, if an existing case on the market is good enough for my purpose, I'll just use it. Focusing on, leverage the community, leverage the ecosystem as much as possible. Focusing my energy on the last 5%. Ship fast. Get your first 5,000 pieces on the market to see if anyone actually like it. If they like it, build more, sell more, and evolve. If it doesn't, nobody likes it, then move on to the next project. And then expecting to return to the community of whatever you design. And for that, in 10 years, they built from zero to industry, which is $100 billion industry, and it changed the face of the mobile industry forever. This is 2016, and if I sit in here 10 years back, 2006, if I sitting up here and starting to talk about, I'm going to make a bold predictions. Nokia is going to go out of business in 10 years, and guy will be like, get out of here. Get out, you are crazy. But in reality, in less than 6 years, Nokia is gone. It no longer exists. Well, kind of exists, but nobody cares. And so when long tail started to change, and out of this system, people work in cooperative way, and now they are extending into new regions. In the past couple of years, they created the second largest mobile phone in France. It's called Wico. And that's this company called Transmission. It's the #1 smartphone brand in Africa. Nobody ever heard of. So, and out of this system, it created a very interesting culture of design. In February, we took 10 makers out of Shenzhen and visit the US. But we picked the maker not from the maker space, but actually from the ecosystem. So industrial designers, engineers, everyone. The two industrial designers who came with us are in their early 30s. So we asked them prepare 5 minutes to talk about yourself. And in that 5 minutes, put some project you have made, you have done, you have designed, and have made it to the market. I don't want your scratch. I don't want some of your project with the rendering on the back of your computers. So in a few days, they prepared that, came in, we did a dry run. And both of them went on stage with a portfolio of about 80 to 90 projects. And remember, these guys are in their early 30s. They graduate from college, they have probably less than 10 years of working experience, but they got 80 projects shipping products on their portfolio, and half of them they actually are lead on the projects. And this is the kind of speed going on in Shenzhen. This is the kind of speed going on in this kind of very open, use as much from the ecosystem as possible. Ship it fast, ship it early, get to the market. And this used to be, and these guys are doing system. These guys are doing project at a minimum, they are already smaller than the traditional manufacturer, or traditional brand, but they are still looking at 100,000 units a year as their minimum. So looking at this ecosystem, look at how they work. Open, cooperative, use as much available use as much currently available as possible, iterate fast, ship fast. This used to be, so for the longest time, this used to be the exclusive, this used to be an exclusive domain for people who work in the region in Shenzhen. But if we think about the global maker movement, it is actually open up the same opportunity for everyone. But the route changed a little bit. Now you have open source hardware, you have a community online, you have all this. Taking all the components, create a new things, but instead of try to build 5,000 of them and throw it into the market, now you have crowdfunding. You can just test this on crowdfunding to see if anybody likes it. So we are looking at the globalization of this kind of ecosystem, this kind of way to look at design, this kind of ways to look at the creation process. Instead of the very narrative of, well, Shenzhen only knows how to manufacture. Now they have to learn about the design. Is the way Shenzhen design is actually becoming global. It's actually becoming a new ways to look at how that process evolves, how the learning process, how the validation process, how all of this evolve. And so we kind of look at the maker movement globally as this globalization of the Shenzhen practice. And this is why Shenzhen also been starting to attract so many people going there. People are not going there only because Foxconn is there. If you are building 1,000 of something, don't expect any callback from Foxconn. They'll not call you back. The reason people are attracting to Shenzhen is the ecosystem is there ready to talk to anyone. And that's the open culture. That's the open part of the Shenzhen. So yeah, I think that's a different practice of design. That's a different practice of looking at things. Globally, we are looking at the maker movement. We are looking at the maker space. We are still trying to figure out how these new open cultures of maker movement, how they consolidate with this very proprietary IP-driven design mainstream design culture. But in Shenzhen, it's the other way around. That open culture is the default model, is the de facto model, and that has been becoming a new attractions of a new group of people coming to Shenzhen. The new group of people actually agree that's how things should work.
Thank you very much for that really full and fascinating answer. I wasn't expecting you to answer with the yes, it's just the same as anywhere else. But on the other hand, what's really interesting, well, one of the many interesting things you've just said is about the way in which, on the one hand, you've got this kind of intensity in Shenzhen, but also this kind of global thing happening around it as well. And there's kinds of all sorts of feedbacks from other places happening. But I was wondering about sort of whether Shenzhen was a very specific case within China, or are there other versions of Shenzhen or other kinds of practice which are very different in other parts of China? And I'm going to turn back to Tom and Zara perhaps to follow up on that. Is Shenzhen a special case?
I mean, I've never been to Shenzhen. But from what I hear today and in conversations elsewhere, I do feel in some ways it is very context specific, that there are processes and environments that you might draw on there that are special to Shenzhen. Having said that, there are many different markets and malls around different cities, especially Beijing, Shanghai, first-tier cities, where you can go to have your things manufactured, not necessarily in the same open source way, but instigating your own collaborations and partnerships with the people that might be in those environments. I don't know if Tom has anything else that he would like to add to that.
Yeah, I think there's nowhere like Shenzhen anywhere else in the world or in China. It's quite a unique city. So I'm sure David's got some stats about how most of the world's electronics come from Shenzhen, not China, but Shenzhen. And that's because there are so many factories there. And so if you're in a makerspace in Nanjing, you've got to be much slower. You don't have access to what someone in Shenzhen has. And so what you're doing is actually you're creating links with Shenzhen and shipping your ideas there to get made, just like you would if you're kind of an entrepreneur in the UK, because that's where you get stuff made in China. If you talk to makerspaces in other cities, what they'll tell you is that they have their own kind of advantages. So Shenzhen's kind of great on the practical stuff, but it's perhaps not so good on the kind of university front. So, Nanjing has just dozens and dozens of universities. Shenzhen has probably
2, 3.
So in Nanjing they really feel that they've got a kind of advantage there in terms of kind of like the human capital and more advanced theoretical side of things. There's no really why I really like Shenzhen, and I think I don't know. I guess kind of my own kind of question for David would be how would the UK do what Shenzhen's doing, because we don't have the factories and we have much stricter IP regimes. So how would a UK policymaker support something like Shenzhen?
I think first of all is the Shenzhen model is now. This really open model is actually not unique to Shenzhen. It's actually we starting to open up different kind of cluster that actually happen in China a lot. So our work is a series of the work which started with John C. Brown, who published a paper during the 2006 Davos describing the Chongqing motorcycle ecosystem. So Chongqing motorcycle, within 10 years, from the mid-90s, overtake 50% of the global motorcycle industry by beating not weak competition, by beating two of the most respected companies. One is Honda, the other one is Yamaha. Take half of the market share from them. And they created in the same open sharing cooperative, and this pattern actually gets repeated in the home appliance industry about an hour north of Shenzhen, and right now there's a very big car part industry also working on the same principle. So I think it's the a lot of time we are asked is what can be learned from Shenzhen to facilitate the makerspace, but it's really for right now the Shenzhen is important. Is everything we are design, everything people are coming to design. If you look at Kickstarter, all the hardest item is Internet of Things. Is this network connected objects, but that's what Shenzhen is really good at. Anything you want, a screen, a PCB, and a plastic, and wrap them around, that's Shenzhen. So I'm going to throw that. So anybody look at your pocket. Anything you have with a battery attached to it, they are most likely to be made in Shenzhen. 90% of the global mobile phone, 95% of the notebook computers, 100% of the DVD and CD players. So all those crazy stuff. And it's one thing to think about not a versus. It's not London versus Shenzhen. It's not Shanghai versus Shenzhen. Shenzhen is actually becoming this global base. It's going to be an amplifier. It's going to be the resource. And this resource is not just for people from Shenzhen. This is a global resource. Think about this. Every big brand you know around, they are already use Shenzhen as a resource. Why should that be reviewed if you are a new startup? Every startup, everybody goes to Shenzhen because the open system there. It's really to come back and look at what Shenzhen has to offer and what its ecosystem meant for startup. First, well, it's without Shenzhen is of course for manufacturers, but another side of Shenzhen people don't know much is Shenzhen is the first city of design certified by UNICEF in China. It's not Shanghai, it's not Beijing. Shenzhen is the first one, probably 4 years before Shanghai. And the reason for that is go back to the two designers we have. In the early 30, 70 projects shipped. And we got 100,000 of them in Shenzhen. And that's the scale. And industrial designer in China doesn't work like industrial designer anywhere. Industrial designer is the entry point to the ecosystem. You can expect an industrial designer you go to and work with in Shenzhen will help you and work with you all the way down to the assembly line, standing next to you in the assembly line, making sure the design actually works. So they have becoming the portal, they have been becoming the entry points to the ecosystem. So I think that the dialogue to develop is not how to compete with Shenzhen, it's how to leverage Shenzhen as a resource. And second of all, Shenzhen is the shipping hub. Shenzhen is the global trading hub. Things come to Shenzhen, they ship everywhere. The Shenzhen Mobile I was talking about, 300 million units a year. Where they ship to? Africa, Southeast Asia, South America, Middle East, everywhere. So also use Shenzhen, not just, a lot of people talks about, oh, I'm making things in Shenzhen, then let me think about the Chinese market. It's not just Chinese market, it's the hub, it's the entry point to the global market, including China, but it's the entry to the global market. Everything you own, you have, with the battery attached to it in the back, it says made in China. It often ships out of Hong Kong airport from Shenzhen. So that's where its strategic point is. So I think to look at this is how to use that as a point to bootstrap more projects. How to use that as a point to encourage more young entrepreneurs to try it out and learning how to play with the system, learning how the ecosystem works. This morning we had the talk, and I think Shenzhen is still this very mythical place. On one hand, it feels like the wild, wild west. Never know what's going to happen when you go down there, but so it could be kind of scary. So really appreciate the 10 pioneers coming there, because I basically just dropped them in the middle of Shenzhen and say, go, have fun. And well, put them on WeChat so I can track them. But it's actually pretty safe cities. And second is go beyond these divisions, go beyond the stereotype of how this works. And the third is I get to say a lot of this a couple of times in UK, so this is great. Yes, look at China, it's backward, the intellectual poverty, you have your problem with intellectual poverty, that might be a perception of still a cheap labors, but take it serious. because you guys missed the first one. Charles Dickens, American no. There was a country which is slave laborers, cheap labor with no respect of intellectual property, and Dickens said the country will probably have no futures. And well, 200 years later, we know what country that is. So, second chance, this is another time around, grab that chance, see what that kind of the opportunity can provide. And I think that's where we are in a very interesting intersection of the history and the time right now. Look at this really bottom-up opportunity. Every place we got small creators. The thing they do can be easy amplified with Shenzhen, and how you reach that, use that, reach your global potential, rather than having, and the other thing about the maker movement, I really don't like is let's just close up and make everything inside. It didn't work before, it will never work in the futures. So looking at this as a re-establishing of a global network from the bottom-up fashion.
Thank you very much. It's really intriguing that there, some authors, and I've heard elsewhere, people talking about this, the Shenzhen model. It reminds me, I was living and studying in Barcelona in the 1980s when this Barcelona model of urban regeneration began to appear. And yes, it was specific to that place, but it was an idea then which began to be thought about and applied and transformed and translated into other places, across Europe. I was thinking about the power of urban design and urban planning as a way of regenerating places. So, I think the idea that, it's all going to happen in Shenzhen, everything's going to be made in Shenzhen, let's pack up and do something else. No, I think there's really an awful lot to learn from that and to apply in our own ways. Now, continuing with this theme then of open and sharing, I want to really just open up the discussion now to everyone else. Is there anyone here who's anyone from Shenzhen in the?
I'm from the same province, but not Shenzhen.
Same province. So a life amongst the special economic zone then as well. Yeah. How's your experience coming from?
Well, the town I brought Dongguan is like another huge province of manufacturing. There's a huge percentage of chainers made from my town. It's kind of similar to Shenzhen, but I think it's great. Like Shenzhen start to focus on design rather than just manufacturing, because I think the main idea about manufacturing is like you need to have a great idea first, then you can make money from it, right? So I think it would be great if I can, I'm studying in the UK now, but if I'm graduate, I decided to start my career back in China. So if I can push my chance, push them, make them put more focus on design but not just producing. That would be better. It will be better for the environment. Also, it will change how people think about about things.
Yeah, thank you very much. I heard that in Shenzhen, people talking about how design will be better for the environment because we'll be actually producing stuff which is needed and wanted, rather than just producing volumes of stuff which is cheap and maybe end up in landfill. But maybe that's too simplistic a reading. But,
actually, you can ask a question. I'm a student from Kingston University, and we have a really good 3D making workshop. And we just finished our stool project in the morning, so we spent 3 weeks making 2 stools. And all the example we saw on the screen is more about machine making. Do you think it's still important, the handmade in China?
thank you very much. Is the handmade important in China? perhaps as a Lit and Zara. Lit, perhaps you want to say something?
Yeah, I think so. So there are different ways to make things, and when you make by hand, and make by machine, the outcome will be different. And as human, you can feel that. Just you can feel that. So actually, I know some friends of mine are artists, and they do really great craft project. Some about textile, and some about jewelry, like silver jewelry that use very thin silver to weave jewelry. And so those craft skill cannot be replaced by machine, or if you use machine to make something similar, it's still feel, as human, you still feel that's not that valuable somehow. Because sometimes maybe if a round circle, a ball or a circle that you see is a circle by your eye, actually is not really a perfect circle. So and artists know that. So when artists make a circle, it probably will not be a perfect circle, but human will take that as a perfect circle. So that's the difference between craft, machine made, and those friends of mine. Actually, they have a lot of orders from like big city or other people that give them job to make things by hand. So I think machine made getting more and more developed, and then actually the value of craft will going higher and higher actually. So they will happen in the same time. Yeah.
Zara, craft skills.
No, I definitely agree. I mean, I think they'll never go away, and it absolutely depends on the situation, of course. On the one hand, you have designers, whether that's out of nostalgia, whether that's aligning themselves with government narratives, aiming to really capitalize on local handmade crafts, or whether it's out of curiosity. Designers will always, I think, be intrigued by these different craft processes. Machine-made and handmade, sometimes they go hand in hand, no pun intended. For example, the designer that I opened with, Liao, he did a project around Ming Dynasty furniture, looking specifically at the forms, but also how they were handcrafted out of wood. And he recreated those processes using specific machines with craftsmen. So they can be, handcrafting can be tools of inquiry, it can be a form of thinking through practice, but really it's down to the person as well. I don't think they're mutually exclusive.
Anybody else here like to make a comment about the role of craft and handmaking in China out of their own experience?
Well, I would just add that I think it's really dangerous to create so much of a binary like Sarah said between handcraft and machine, especially at the prototyping level and in these makerspaces. I think what you're exploring is a kind of craftsmanship, mastering the tools at hand, and it starts to become a little bit of a conceit to say a tool of a craftsman is not much different than a tool of a 21st century maker. And then in the end, they're simply tools. The only difference is one has a little bit more electronics embedded into it than another, but it takes a lot of kind of individual mastery. So I really like to discuss the whole idea of making as a kind of craft, as a kind of broader continuum of crafts, rather than have the two in binary opposition, a bit of a longer trajectory.
I think that part of that is you're making that as part of your design project. So this is another way to look at the sensor ecosystem. It's really very hard to pictures to put your mindset into this. We are living in a planet of 7 billion people, there's a city with only 30 million to 80 millions. That city is actually responsible for 95% of what everybody carry in their pocket. And that's a scale, it's actually harder to think about. But to that context, Shenzhen is actually have interesting models. It has the very highly specialized ecosystem, but they are very easy access. So yes, that's a value to be going into a place to craft, to understand the material, but for once, for twice. But when we are giving this very rapid cooperation, very rapid, nobody works alone in Shenzhen. There's no lone wolf in Shenzhen. Everybody works as a partner. Everybody works as everybody works as a partnership. The reason I mentioned that is globally there's this rapid prototyping industry, and 96% of this industry are in China, and half of them exist in Shenzhen. So the industrial designer, so my lab is in the middle of this big industrial designer park. And if I'm in anywhere else on the world, if I'm stationed right in the middle of surrounded by all the industrial designer, I don't even have to worry about how my lab is going to be sustain itself, because, well, we'll just do this but we are in Shenzhen. The rapid prototyping house are on every industrial designer's speed dial. Given that your drawing, it will come back in 3 days, looking exactly like the shipping products. And that is another layer of things available, and that actually impact how they design. But they don't just digitally go over there, they talk, they understand what the process is. They also understand they also listen to the advice from the experienced craftsman. It's a highly specialized space. It's a highly cooperative space to inform and to exchange that information. I think, yes, the crafting is important, but that's dangers of the makerspace movement, especially the Fat Lab variety, is so into about skill. It's so into about your skill of operating the laser cutter, your skill of operating the CNC. Then you forgot not everybody is handy. I mean, I probably won't start in the makerspace if I actually have to craft. I mean, that's give me actually also interesting perspective on this. I know a lot of you come from designers, and I always talk about it. You don't really need a design education in the primary to identify which one of the kids will go on and grow up to be designers. Just get their book, just get one of their textbook, and if you look at the margins, if it's all drawing and everything, that would be on the track to be artists and designers. The rest of them would be like me. There's no hope for me. So yes, I think that's part of the thing. Be mindful is not every one of us can actually do that. That's a fact. Overemphasize on that is taking the maker movement down in a very dangerous path.
Please.
So I have a question now, the Shenzhen model. I'm just wondering, from my experience of living in China, lots of friends who work in a factory or who owns a factory, they say the cost structure is really, really hard for them to survive. I'm sure in areas like Shenzhen, there are lots of small, medium-sized business or even family business who are those manufacturers. They have very thin margin. So I wonder whether the Shenzhen model of taking leverage of those resources, making things so cheap that they can ship it so fast, is going to be very, very sustainable if yes, or these model of Shenzhen going to evolve in the future? Are they going to stay the same? So that's my question.
What future Shenzhen? Are we post Shenzhen model?
Upset.
Okay. So, yeah, I think you describe is true. If you only produce things, then the margin is very thin, and for the owner, actually, it's not easy to maintain that, because if you have no order, then you still need to pay all the things, the rent, the electricity, the salary, all the things. So it's very dangerous. So manufacturing is not easy. It's not easy to maintain. And I think that's one of the reasons why like OEM want to be upgraded to ODM, because they want more flexible, and they want to not only to make the design from outside, but can produce their own design, like the design generate from the company. So don't think workers on the line as they just make things as a machine, but don't think about things. Actually, while they make something, they are doing their job. They think about how I can improve it. They think about maybe that will be better. That will be interesting. And I think maker movement in the current Chinese maker movement, some incubator that empowered by the very big manufacturing factory, they expect to absorb the new idea from their inside, from the company inside, to build those ideas into products, to open a way for them. So I think that's one of the reasons also, the motive behind it. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, but the thing is, you have to think about this is at that scale, I mean, it's still trying to get people into the mindset. One city producing 95% of the good. That idea is to sink into is the Shenzhen cannot just say, okay, well, I'm upgrading myself. If you don't move 95% of things, everything up on the margins, because Shenzhen doesn't only produce iPhone for the consumption in here. Shenzhen also produce mobile phone for Africa, which has to cost $40. That as long as the requirement, the need is there, someone is going to fulfill that segment. Someone is going to do it. So it's actually kind of dangerous to point to say, okay, well, Shenzhen, you need to upgrade, because as long as there's a demand of a $40 mobile phone in Africa, someone will operate in a facility to fulfill that. It's not like other countries say, okay, well, I'm tired of manufacturers, let me just ship it to China. The other country can do it, but if you're starting to think about that concentrations, there's nowhere to move. There's nowhere to just that scale is not moving anytime soon. So that component will always exist. The margins things, but hey, I'm still operating the business because there's still money to be made. Are they upgrading? Of course they are. Are they changing? Of course they are. But even if you move that, the vast competition right there will push that to the same extent. And it's also on the reverse way to look at this, is what's a reasonable margin? What's a reasonable gain on design? I mean, we got a lot of people thinking about that. Oh, if you design, you can charge an arm and a leg. Look at Apple. Look at Jonathan Ive. Look at how much Apple is charging people for the $200 bomb value iPhone. But it's not just design. It's not just. It's Tim Cook is a genius in supply chain management, in squeezing the suppliers. It's not just that design, it's not just that one point. So it's also to reflect so what's your design really for? Are you designing this so you can piggyback on the marketing and sell as many units as you can? Or are you designed as you changing specific groups' life? Are you designed for someone? The other thing to look at is a lot of people talk about social enterprise. This is also the other side to look at. With that margins, they are practically social enterprise. They are serving a purpose. They are fulfilling a market niche and market niche. So that it's very interesting. We look at how Shenzhen, look at how it related to everything. It's not a very simple models. I mean, it's not just the city can just say, okay, well, dump this and someone take it. It's the vast scale. Again, has to be there to experience, but that number, that kind of scale, make the infrastructure impossible to be moved, to be replaced overnight.
Thank you very much. Can I just swing the argument completely in the opposite direction? Because we've been talking a lot about high volume production, relatively low margins, the $40 mobile phone for the African market and so on. I'm thinking about the Chinese market itself, and if there is the question really, is there a role for high margin, high value, almost like luxury end design? We hear a lot about Western luxury brands finding large scale markets in China, but is there a space in China for the production of its own luxury brands, for example? No?
Yeah, there is. There's that department store in Shanghai that's owned by Hermes, which is all about. I mean, it's still French, globally owned, but it's definitely about inculcating or feeding the kind of the growing desire for homemade luxury and design-led luxury. That makes sense. So it's coming as part of a growing kind of consumer market, and as the stock of Chinese brands rise, both at a kind of mass market level and also at a luxury level as well.
And is that affecting the sort of design culture within China in any way? Does anybody want to pitch in with any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I was just on a panel with Rosanna Hu from Marion Hu, who's one of these, you could say, a boutique architecture office doing very well, producing architecture, interiors, and furniture, showing their works in Milan, selling chairs at very high price points. And we were on a panel about copying, and her main complaint was that her work is being copied. So I mean, when you start to enter into that kind of luxury sphere, and you're situated in China, where there's such a, as David says, ecosystem for rapid kind of imitation, it becomes very difficult to maintain that kind of price, that luxury price point, when people are able to undercut so quickly. But I think that's a relatively minor complaint.
Well, you could say what they're doing is fulfilling a market slightly below their aspirations, and there will be people who will know that they want the real thing in the same way as the difference between a Rolex and so it might actually be doing, in that scale of market, it might actually not be doing any harm in the long run.
You'll always get that democratization of luxury that will also help fuel the luxury market.
Well, I think also the idea of the luxury is changing. I mean, the corporatized of, I mean, luxury is not, well, they're not used to mean just expensive. They are durable. They have some significance. They have emotional attachment. They have they provide all this. But right now, in the past few years, the corporatized of the luxurious item, the franchising of the luxurious. Right now, Louis Vuitton will stack their logo on anything just to make a buck.
Yeah.
And but that's where point the luxurious item is. And they hitting the right point in China is the, is that really a space to really grow a luxurious items, a luxurious brand, or are we looking at the end of the luxurious brand? If you, I mean, Louis Vuitton is the best things to track. If you track them for the past couple of years, the only reason they are really still alive is that's a country of 1 billion people who finally can afford them, and that's where they are actually generating their revenue. But is that the tail end of this? So I think it's another way to look at the questions. And the other thing is defining Chinese luxurious, what it means. I recently just gave up my iPhone. I switched to this company called Meizu. So this phone is produced by the same factories, same material, higher spec in every regard as the iPhone 6s, and it's half of the price. Is it luxurious in China? It is. It's a 3,000 phone where at least half of the China cannot afford. But is it expensive? Well, not exactly. So that's also an interesting question. Is China going to come back and actually starting to define what's reasonable for a luxurious item to charge?
So do you think that will have effects outside China then as well? That will be it's redefining what we think of as. So eventually will we say no? Why pay $600 for Apple 6?
Well, the French is learning it. Now they are moving to they are moving to Wico. It's a better value propositions. We see signal. We see this signifiers of the things could come, but the mindset shift is much faster in China because at the end of the day, it's the youngest countries. At the end of the day, none of the brand means anything because they don't have a rooted history, and so the game is it's game changing because one day everything can be pop up from there. But whether or not it is going to become global, it's interesting questions. Is the Wico model going to be replicated in other countries in Europe? Is that redefining what a value proposition is? Is that going to happen again? It's going to be repeated because for one thing, it's been actually repeated in India. It's not kind of not easy to say it's been repeated after Wico because that has been going on in India, in Africa, in all these countries. New brand gets established. New latest functionality gets delivered to all this region at a reasonable price. So yeah, I think.
Yeah. So the answer was yes, really. It is a change in the
It
world.
could be.
Yes.
It could be.
Yeah.
Can I ask a bit of a different question? So, why don't you go ahead?
Go ahead, Kat, and then we'll go on to.
I was going to change tack slightly, which was that you mentioned lots of countries in your talk about India and Africa and different places, and you also extolled the virtues of Shenzhen as being able to do everything and anything. So what does that mean for the UK? Do we have any role in this?
No, I'm not saying, I mean, Shenzhen is good at making things. Shenzhen is good at manufacturing. But, well, for good things is right now we are looking at the new divided market, new niche market, new opportunity. They are not being fulfilled. I mean, Wico is not a Shenzhen designer and goes to France. is French designer goes to Shenzhen and leverage that ecosystem. We are seeing more and more of this happening. We are seeing more and more of this is popping up. It's really not looking at, that's a chunk of Shenzhen, it's just the sheer scale is not worth even consider try to replicate. But turn around, use it as resource. Turn around, use it as the amplifier. You build something today, I mean, on the reverse, at the same time, the rapid development of Shenzhen, it doesn't give their designers a time to really think about the critical making, the critical thinking about their item, because it's a requirement, that's how you work. It doesn't give their designer times to say, okay, well, I'm going to accumulate my fan base. I'm going to spend time grow my brand. I'm going to spend time cultivate the other things which is important. And that opened up huge opportunity to everyone. That opened up huge opportunity. Now, instead of be able to, because right now the small startup, we have looked at been mentoring a lot of the hardware startup. They went through a two mindset. I would call the pre-crowdfunding and post-crowdfunding. Pre-crowdfunding is all creative, all fun, all really doing this, like, it's my stuff, people notice. I'm solving new problems every day. I'm creating new things every day. Post-crowdfunding, 9 to 5, buy the car. I had to get this thing produced. I had to call these guys. I had to get him to do this, buy the book, fast and reliable. And every day they just get sucked back in this really rigid, very rigorous job. And most of the stuff I have seen is after they finish deliver their Kickstarter, deliver to their Kickstarter backer, they burn out. They just never again. And they lose the opportunity because there's a reason the manufacturer is not here. It's not just economy. It's, you get to the point, we all want to be in the creative field because we get a new problem every day. We solve that, that's good for the brand. There's a study to prove that. So it's really looking at that kind of opportunity, that kind of place as an amplifier, that kind of place how they can help you achieve a goal without burning yourself out.
I was going to say, there is that feeling in Shenzhen, you need to have a lie down after a few days. So, I don't know how you two actually survive, what you're made of. There was a...
I did have to how slow and quiet London is.
Yes.
Excellent. Pedestrian.
There's a question. Someone had.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Thank you, really interesting. I suppose it's a couple of related points about the value of this open culture that you're talking about and maybe interrogating it a bit further. So in terms of Shenzhen and its open nature, does that also refer to working with the local communities, people in the city who aren't necessarily makers professionally or even sort of naturally, let's say? Are there schemes or initiatives to try and engage more diverse groups of people into those spaces? Because it's something I think here and other places have struggled with sometimes, despite the kind of so-called open nature of makerspaces. They are often made up of quite homogenous groups of young lives, basically. And also, in terms of recognising the value of that open culture, have you found successful ways of evidencing that for policymakers beyond the economic, I suppose? Because that's something that I think a lot of people are struggling with.
Thank you very much for two really interesting questions. First one, how can these spaces, or how are these spaces engaging other communities? And I thought I'd just ask Sarah Green. that question, because Sarah Green is from the V&A and has been working with the Sheku project, a big project the V&A is involved in, and very much in that space.
Yeah, good question. I'm still trying to find out the answer of this as well. So, yeah, I don't know how many people know about the V&A project in Sheku, but we've partnered with China Merchants Group to support their ambition to build a museum of design, and part of that will be a V&A permanent exhibition on design. But we're also doing various other things around the project, one of which that I'm doing is developing an education program in Sheku, in Shenzhen, about design. And in my research, one of the major things I've come across is, in terms of school teaching, the curriculum is lit and said is incredibly didactic, incredibly prescribed. I think Chinese schools have the freedom really only to devise about 12% of it at school level. The rest is very heavily dictated by government, and design isn't a part of that curriculum. In terms of university education, there are many kind of new, fairly relatively new design schools popping up. But design tutors, when I've talked to them, they're finding that when students come to them, they're really lacking creative and design thinking skills. The entrance exams to university comprise of basically all producing the same drawing, and you see these images of all these drawings being laid out on the floor, and tutors are supposed to kind of, from that, guess sort of which is best. So many of the courses kind of have a foundation year as sort of part of that. So I find that makerspace is really a kind of a key component in this in design education in China, and they're sort of, I think, playing a role in filling this void in formal learning, and that in part has been enabled because of the government backing and the kind of financial input into makerspaces, which has seen. How many makerspaces did you say are happening in schools in Shenzhen now? How many schools have received funding?
Last year is 100 in Shenzhen, yeah.
So you're seeing makerspaces popping up in public education schools, but as Lynn said as well, there's a lot of there is a lot of sort of problem with this, and the driver for it is very much about economic growth through makerspaces. So. And a lot of makerspaces host courses and have an educational component for young people, but also a lot of them charge heavily for that. So how democratic and open source it is in terms of community engagement is something I'm still trying to get my head around. But I think Liv and David probably have more to say about that.
Yeah. So I should start first. So, like Lichland, we have adult members, and we have like programs for kids also. And like from time, we are very welcome to parents or kids that bring their own ideas to the space. And so, actually, from time to time, we do encounter parents that with the idea that can I have a workshop at your space that for 10 of our kids, so 10 family grew up and say, hey, can we spend half a day in the weekend here, and you teach them something to make something. The word they mention most is craft. They don't mention like a maker, but they mention craft. They want their kid to put hand on something and learn something about making. So they use this word, but maker also, but craft is more often. So they do want to be involved, and they do need a space for the community. It's more like a community center, I think. So like during this visit, then we visit a media center in Bristol, which I think is a very successful example. So they provide a lot of space or program for the young people there to think about the social problems, local social problems, and provide them opportunities to express their opinion on that and try to fix that. And they've been they stay there for more than 20 years, the Media Lab. And from talks, informal talks with the employee there, that I know actually the assistant of that media center help reducing the rate of crime for the whole community, which I found is very impressive. So do the community need such a space for kids to explore more, for adults to explore more? Yes, and I think Makerspace can act like that. And the model is still under exploration. I would say that's the what's happening in Nature Lab. We're still looking for that, but I think we will keep just doing better and better until we find the answer. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I think that that's always these assumptions about the Chinese formal education stifle the creativity, but the problem is it's not exactly true. So I'll give you one example. I have the luxurious of spending my 20s. I'm originally from Taiwan, but I have the luxurious to spend my 20s in the U.S. So at that time, the reason I can just drop my PhD and go work for internet startup is so most of the Western cultures, the age 30s means the beginning of the real life. Any mistake you make in the 20s is called life experience. But if you picture a 20 years old Chinese, by the time you reach 30, the society require you to get a house, buy a house, get married, have kids. Right now, with the lifting of the one-child policy, you have to decide whether or not you want one or two. And this is incredible social pressures. This is incredible rigid social expectation, what you have to achieve. You have no chance to play around in your 20s. But we have already started to see interesting evidence. So I got into the trouble by being quoted, only the rich second generation can be good makers. I was telling the Wall Street reporters in terms of we already see a lot of creativity come out of young people, but that's because a lot of them come from rich second generation. Their life goal for their 30, big chunk of them is being fulfilled by their parents. And second one is looking at the IMA education in NYU. Half of the IMA is composed of the Chinese student, and the other half is composed of international student. And right now, the best performing top quarter are Chinese female students in that group. And if you be getting a scholarship from NYU to study in NYU Shanghai, you have to be the top of the Chinese testing system. That means stereotyping is the most brain dead one. But given the right environment, given the right encouragement, they bounce back, and they actually bounce back really strong. So it's very easy to just point to say, okay, well, it's a rigorous testing, therefore it kills people. But have to remember one thing, and one of the greatest mind generations, people like Alan Turing, out of the British scientists, they came out of an era where it was a rigorous testing-driven education. It didn't stifle Alan Turing. It didn't stifle that generation of great mind. I don't think it's easy to just point to education, but I think it's really look at if the passion has outlet to express themselves. If they can afford to express themselves, I think it's easy to look at China and say, okay, well, it looks like everywhere, and therefore you 20-something just behavior like 20-something elsewhere, go get drunk and go to Burning Man and try to figure out something new. They cannot afford to. they have to get a house. They have to save up. They have to buy. They have to do this by 30s.
I don't think it's a case of saying that the system kills creativity in people. I think the question is about how the maker movement and the educational component of the maker movement does it democratize design for a bigger audience, for hobbyists or for young people who perhaps might want to learn or find out about design but don't want to go into the profession. It might be a case about, it might be a more holistic education that looks at the changing or affecting the values of a consumer as well. So I don't necessarily think it's a case of saying that the system kills creativity, but more a case of what are the opportunities, or how can the maker movement and maker spaces open up different levels of engagement with creativity.
Yeah, I'm linking to your second question about how do we then evidence that to then feed back into policy? How do we evidence all the other values that design, as well as making, or design and making?
Yes.
And, yes, Liao.
Yeah, so I want to add some more. So I'm under 30, and so when I was young, then I don't feel the homework or those assignments from school is this heavy. So when now I teach class in school, I feel that's very heavy. But if this we should blame the system for that, and actually that's critical. And because Chinese has a very huge popularity, and then actually that system like say, hey, this is the correct answer and that is the score you got, in some degree make sure this is fair for everyone. So the system work like this way, that the score make sure it's fair for everyone. And what should be changed would be like should be like how parents, how the whole society see what is valuable. This should be changed. The opinion about what is valuable should be changed. Like the parents care about the kid, want they have a better life in the future. That's why they press the kids so hard to get higher score. But if they know actually you have more ways, you have more choices to pick, then will they just put them in one way? Or maybe they will say, hey, actually if you want to go that way, you get my support also. So the question would be like this. So how to change people's opinion about what is valuable, what is a good life, and then they will make better or more flexible decision about this. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We're moving into our last few minutes, and after we finish, we're going to open up a bar, aren't we, Kat? Yeah, you're invited for drinks downstairs.
Yes, yeah.
But I thought just as a sort of finishing up moment, therefore, I think it's been a really fascinating discussion, but you mentioned the future. It made me think, okay, what do we want for the future? What futures could be made? And I just wanted to ask each of the panelists very briefly, and anyone else in the room, what would you like to see change or for the future in China? Tom, have you got any quick thoughts?
Well, yeah. So we asked people this in the survey, about 100 people. And, they know better than me. So a few things they said. So that maker spaces will basically disappear. So because it becomes so popular, it's happening everywhere, that they won't be anyone talking about maker spaces anymore. Some people said that half of China's GDP will be generated by makers in the future. So they're really kind of buying into this. Other people talked about it being a much bigger part of the education system, so that every child can take part in this kind of maker education. And then other people talked about the kind of open source element, meaning that anyone can, if they want, kind of be an entrepreneur, make use of this kind of open source ecosystem. But yeah, I think it's really hard to know where it's going because the Chinese government's investing so much money in it, so many different types of institutions are opening makerspaces in China. It's fascinating, but I have no idea where it's going to go.
Okay, thank you. What would you like to see, Zara?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say where it's going to go, especially with Xi Jinping's tightening, let's say, of certain fields and areas within China at the moment. But where I'd like to see it going is, I mean, we often speak about China as if it's this one homogenous country. And as we've been talking, Sarah, as you mentioned, this idea of democratization of tools and knowledge and resources, it's just really struck me that a majority of these spaces occur along the east, and how much are they going to filter out to the west? How much are we going to take into consideration the 56 ethnic minorities within China within these discussions? So I think there's a long way to go, but we should start shifting these conversations around these other areas as well, in my opinion.
Thank you very much. Lit, what would you like to see happen for yourself or your...
Yeah, I think in the future, so like makerspace, maybe makerspace will not be super big, but makerspace will be like community center, and each community then have a makerspace that kids or parents, they can get informal learning experience, and there are maybe some super node as work as incubators that scattered around the city that help ideas that test or grow in makerspace, small makerspace, to help them go through the way and become entrepreneur. Yeah, I think the future will be like this.
Yeah, shift to something like civic innovation labs as well, or something like that. David, what do you want to see happen?
Yeah, well, I think it's the it's truly the democratization of innovations, and the big chunk of it is really recognizing the opportunity and how to seize the opportunity. Again, I don't mean Shenzhen can do everything, but really this democratization, Shenzhen will become a very important resource. It's not been democratized from the state, but been democratized from the brain, be democratized from the big company. And I think that's the question of our era. It's not us against the government. It's us against Apple. And so that's who we want. We need to get democratized from. So yeah.
So you can always buy a Dutch Fairphone, which is ethical phone in that respect. So
create your own Fairphone.
Yes, create your own Fairphone. Thank you very much. How very interesting. We are going to be able to continue the conversation over a few drinks down in, what do we call it, the cavern?
It's called the Snug officially.
The Snug. We're going to go to the Snug.
Which is just downstairs into the cafe, and then the small area, Snug-like area.
So an opportunity for networking, discussion, continuing the conversation. Thank you very much to Tom, Zara, Lit and David for sharing their wonderful views, and to yourselves for taking part in this. Thank you to Astrid and the ICA.